Hey, welcome to the Cyber Savvy Woman, where women business owners reclaim their power in the digital world. We shatter the myth that cybersecurity is too complex to master and transform protection strategies into clear, actionable guidance. This is your digital empowerment sanctuary, where cyber fear becomes cyber confidence. Whether you're protecting client trust as a therapist or safeguarding financial data as an advisor, you'll hear from women founders who've conquered digital challenges and security experts who speak your language. Every woman leading a business deserves to feel unshakable in her digital decisions, no matter her technical background. Are you ready to stop letting cybersecurity intimidate you and start letting it elevate you? Here's your host, Rachele Schainker.
Welcome back to the Cyber Savvy Woman, where we talk about practical ways women can protect themselves, their businesses, and their futures in our increasingly digital world. I'm your host, Rachele Schainker, a Silicon Valley technologist and owner of the award-winning managed service provider, CMIT Solutions of San Mateo. Today's guest is Keith Corbin, founder of Evolution Coaching, and he is a leadership coach who teaches tech leaders how to navigate the structural realities of their roles with more clarity, competence, and agency. In this episode, we talk about why so many leaders internalize friction as personal failure, what burnout really looks like before people recognize it. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rachele.
Yeah, and so for people meeting you for the first time, how would you describe what you do today?
Let's start with a little background, which is I've spent my career in technology, started as an engineer, moved into product management, and later worked in partnerships, all for really hyper growth tech companies, multiple startups that I've worked through. And so I've taken that experience and bring it into the world of coaching, working with other engineering and tech product leaders, particularly in a space that's often dominated by people with HR backgrounds. Uh, I like to work with folks where I can speak their language. I understand the seat that they're in and the challenges that they're facing. And then from that, providing them with a different way to see and approach the challenges they have and how they can grow and evolve within their roles.
What kind of first drew you into the tech world?
Happenstance.
Are you an engineer? Yeah, happenstance? Okay, all right.
Uh, I was fortunate, I came up at an age when the internet was new and I learned to code when I was very young, basic on an old Commodore 128. So that may date me a little bit. But then,
It's okay. Safe space.
exactly. Thank you for that.
Yes.
And then I went to music school, which was wonderful and great, but realized that my career as a jazz musician was going to be rather limited. And I was able to fall back on the coding skills that I had learned growing up and landed my first role in operations and built my career in tech from there.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us about the moment when you kind of realized you want to move from being, the person inside the system into kind of outside of it and helping people navigate it. What was that moment? What did that moment look like?
Well, interestingly, I sort of started doing it in parallel. So my first experience with coaching came when I got my first coach. And I was working towards, I think, being a director at the time. And working with a coach really helped me change how I was facing the role and do things differently. And it was very impactful. And at the same time, a light bulb went off, which was that the thing I love to do most when working with my team could be a career separate from working with the team. And so years later, I gained an opportunity to train with Peter Bregman, who is an executive coach. And that was an opportunity to see, okay, I've been doing this with my own team. Can I do it more broadly? Do I have skills and does it work? And I learned a lot from him and that experience with him and Howie Jacobson. And that was sort of the moment. Right from then, I started taking on clients and I continued to work for another 6 years in leadership roles while I was coaching people on the side.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And then it was about a year and a half ago now that I decided I wanted to just coach people and move away from the corporate world.
Yeah. What kind of surprised you the most, would you say, about building your own business after, so many years being inside established tech companies?
It's the things you don't know that you have to do, I think, you know? We all imagine, if I do great work, people will just come to me and that will work, and at a certain scale, it starts to once you have enough name recognition in that, but you have to do marketing, you have to do sales, you have to do some of these parts of building a business that are, for me as a tech person, a little less familiar, but they're also not the reason you go into the business, right? Very few people start a business, which is, I love sales. What's the thing I could sell? Usually it's, I want to start a business. I guess I have to learn sales to be able to make it work. If you just love sales, you work for a big company selling something great, right? You don't feel like you have to build your own product necessarily to do that. And so that's been the biggest learning, I would say, for me, is how to sell, how to market myself, how to get my name out there, and to connect with the people who are going to be the best possible candidates for me to work with.
Yeah, no, it's true. I also had a long corporate background, and starting my own business, it was, um, I mean, I didn't have an MBA or something, but it's like there's so many moving parts where before you were just doing this, you were over here doing this, and now you have to keep your eye on everything. So for me, one of the biggest is learning how to delegate, right? And like being like, okay, I don't have to do everything. Don't be the bottleneck. Try to offload. And so that's something because in corporate America, I always wanted to be the person who could do it all, right? Oh, I could do that, the yes person, but that doesn't work when you're the founder. So your message. Let's talk a little bit about your coaching philosophy today. Your message is very different, I believe, from a traditional leadership coaching. What do you think sometimes leadership advice they get wrong, or it's a miscue?
A lot of time in leadership advice, it focuses on leaders and the traits of those leaders, right? The idea that leaders should be compassionate and empathetic and all of these things. And that, I don't disagree with that. I do think it is important that leaders care about their teams. What most of this advice misses is that leaders are not separate from the systems that they're within, right? You have a sense of, there's always somebody who you're under and whose authority you have to listen to. There's a structure that you're a part of, and there's a dynamic within that that you have to work with, right? Even the CEO of a company, unless it's privately owned and they're the only person who owns it, doesn't have free reign to do whatever they want. They're bounded by their board of directors, and they're bounded by investors who will have their own say in how they want things to go. And so we have to recognize that we're not, free agents who can do whatever we want, but that we are within constrained systems. Those systems play a role, and how we react and work within them is important. And that often leads to one of the challenges I see for leaders and people in management roles, is they think that because they can't do everything that they want to do, that is some sort of personal failing, that they're not doing enough, that it's because of them that they can't get there, rather than recognizing the system is not set up in a way that you can both do your job and do that, right? You can do everything you want and you may get fired, or you can follow the rules and compromise on certain aspects. And it's that recognition that you are in those positions that are constrained that I think a lot of the leadership advice misses.
Yeah. You talk about helping leaders lead through contradictions, not around them. What does that mean in practice?
Well, part of what, I was just talking about, right? A common one that comes up, right? Many leaders, many good leaders, I think, fall into this idea that they want to be servant leaders. And there's a contradiction in that, which is, as much as you may want to serve the team, you're still the one responsible for their reviews, their bonuses, who gets raises, who gets promotions. And if there's layoffs, you may be making the decisions on who leaves. And so you can't fully take on this position of a servant leader because you have to have these other responsibilities that are given to you as well. And so it's not to pretend that the contradiction doesn't exist, but it's to recognize that it does and to understand the limits of how you can serve the team and how you can do it in a way that is honest with them, that there are things that because of the position the organization has placed me in, there are things that I will need to be responsible for that may go against some of how I'd like to be able to support the team and deal with that contradiction rather than just avoiding it and thinking that you're doing one thing when you really aren't.
Yeah, I love that point. It's so true because yeah, it could be a slippery slope, right? And just keeping that top of mind. You often say that friction in leadership is not necessarily a mistake, but inherent in that role. And maybe that's kind of what we're talking about too, that friction of wanting to be servant, but also having to be, make those tough decisions. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more about leaning into the friction in leadership?
Yeah, well, I think especially in today's age, right, with AI, where everything should just be as easy and as efficient as possible. And we sometimes miss the role that things that slow us down have. And I'll give an example that's completely, outside of leadership even. There's three ways that I can capture ideas, right? I use Whisper, so I can just talk and it transcribes it. It's amazing and wonderful. I can type and I can handwrite. When I'm with clients, I handwrite. That is the highest friction activity. I can capture the least amount of information, but that friction means I remember more. It keeps me more connected to the conversation. It allows me to pick out what matters the most. I could have AI transcribe it, but that would not give me the same benefit within the conversation of being able to remember something they said 20 minutes ago because jotting it down allowed me to connect with it in a way that even typing wouldn't have. And so the lowest friction way, right, Whisper and using that is great when I'm doing something that's fast or quick, or I just need to capture a note or a thought. But even when I'm writing, at a certain point, I have to go from what I captured with Whisper to hand typing so I can get to how I really want it to be phrased.
Yeah, so you can get it in there.
And so friction is something that it does create value for us. And it's helpful to think about where friction is useful versus where friction is maybe just painful, right? If there's something, if there's a form that you have to fill out in triplicate just to get reimbursed for a charge that happens every month, okay, that may not be useful friction to that process. But there are times where the friction of how you conduct one-on-ones and having an agenda that you go through where, yes, that is a little bit more work and it does slow things down in a way, creates a structure that then becomes valuable.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's great. It's a great take on friction because I don't really hear people talking about it like that. They always just want to remove it. So I appreciate how you're kind of like evaluating it. Uh, why do you think you know so many leaders maybe they may feel like they're struggling and that there's something wrong with them? Maybe it's not necessarily wrong with them. Why do they think if they're struggling it's them? I guess succinctly. I mean, maybe it is them, but maybe it's not them.
Sometimes, there's always things we can try to do differently. And there's always ways that we can see the circumstances we're in through a different perspective. That doesn't necessarily remove every struggle, right? Especially middle management roles are roles that are inherently filled with these contradictions and stress points, right? You are responsible for a team that would like to work on the things that they want to work on. They want to get raises and promotions and bonuses. They want to be paid well. They want to enjoy their work and they want flexibility and freedom. And an organization that wants as most efficiency and as much value out of the team as possible. Those things will not always fit together perfectly. And when you're in a management role, your job is to deal with two things that sometimes are going to be in contradiction. It's going to not be possible to appease both sides. And I think oftentimes when we talk about leadership or a lot of the leadership books, it assumes that if you could just behave in this one way, everything would work. Everything would be complete and whole and wonderful. And so it's because you haven't attained this way of being that there's this gap, there's this problem, rather than seeing the gap as the reality of middle management. You are in a role that is dealing with contradictions constantly, right?
Yeah.
There is a way to just sit in it perfectly and have it always work. And I think that's part of it, right? We A lot of it is the way we talk about it. A lot of it is the way that people have been brought up to think about it. And we don't often sit back and recognize that no, there's structurally my job is to deal with this, and there is no right answer that's gonna be right 100% of the time.
Yeah. On your site, you lay out concepts like the frame, the position, the pattern, the signal, the shift. At a high level, we don't have to deep dive into each component, but can you kind of walk us through the idea of having that framework and maybe how they each kind of work together or the intent of that?
Yeah, a lot of it is about trying to help people see how they are seeing things. And so the notion and then how that contributes to how they're behaving and acting. And so the notion of a frame is we always see things through some sort of frame, some sort of perspective. And I would say we're never aware of what it is. And the moment we become aware of, oh, I'm seeing it this way, then you're inside some other perspective, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We're always inside of something, some worldview. And when we can see it, it broadens it a bit, but you don't escape that other level. And so part of it is recognizing and seeing the frame through which you are seeing things. Not that you can escape it, but that you can gain clarity and you can learn to recognize that everything you see is always through some sort of perspective and there are alternatives. It's also the structural component I think is very important in understanding part of how you see things will be based on the position that you occupy because that position has different incentives, it has different goals and purposes, it has different relations to the rest of the structure. And so when you're sitting in a management position, you are going to see certain things differently than your team may see them if they're ICs because their position is different. And so recognizing how you're situated also shifts that perspective. And then this creates patterns, right, of behavior and ways of seeing things and expectations. And that's a lot of what the work of coaching is about is understanding, recognizing those patterns and finding ways to break through them and understand them within those contexts.
Yeah. Notice them and then kind of shift. Yeah. No, I like that. When a client comes to you saying, my team isn't aligned or everything feels chaotic, what are you listening for underneath the surface? When you hear people kind of starting off there, what does that alert you to?
It's usually a question about what's the bigger context here? What else is going on? Um, and what's driving that, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Especially when people are in organizations, and I think all organizations are dysfunctional to some extent. Um, it's sort of the nature of an organization and what it's trying to do. Like everything can't be smooth running at all times. But that dysfunction is usually serving a purpose. That dysfunction usually exists because someone is benefiting in some way from that dysfunction. Even if they don't like it, they may be benefiting from it, right? We all have the habits that um, I would love to stop doing it because it definitely does not make my life better, but we can't. And the reason we can't is there's some benefit that we're getting from it.
Or a payoff or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helping, right? And so it's either keeping us from something else that we don't wanna face, or it's hiding some aspect. And so finding out the what is this actually serving ends up being a useful way in, because now we're not talking about, oh, this is broken or these things are happening. We're talking about how the system is achieving the goal that it needs to achieve. And if you want it to work differently, something else is going to have to be achieving that goal, right? It's like the smokers trying to stop smoking. If, well, in the olden days, remember, people would take smoke breaks and go outside. It's like, well, if the only way you can get a break from work is to go outside and have a cigarette, you're gonna need to find some other way of taking a break, or you're not gonna stop smoking, right? Because it's tied to this need and this relationship that you have there. And I think a lot of organizational problems are similar. They're solving something for the organization or for individuals with enough power within it, that until that is solved by some other mechanism, things will not shift.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I'll say, if you're doing it, you're digging it.
Yes.
There's some sort of payoff. There's some reason you're doing it, and it may not be what you want, but there's a reason. Yeah, I agree with that.
And it may not be something that's comfortable to admit to.
Exactly, exactly. And most likely, most likely.
Most likely, there's something about it that you are enjoying, and it's hard. It may be hard to admit what it is and what it's doing for you, but there's something within that.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think middle managers and emerging execs are often, overlooked in leadership conversations? Why do you think they kind of like fall to the wayside a little bit?
I'm not entirely sure. I think, you know, part of it may be aspirational, right? You always want to help people when they first go into management, and then everybody wants to talk to the C-level executives and those who have made it.
Yeah, the structure.
But the middle managers often do get left behind, and I do think the middle managers face usually a very interesting challenge. When you first start becoming a manager, your first job in management oftentimes is very akin to what you were a subject matter expert in. And so you go from being, the best engineer on the team to leading a team of engineers doing the same thing you used to be doing. You find a way of working where it's like, I know everything. I can help the team grow, and it's great. When you get to middle management, you've suddenly been placed in charge of people who you aren't the expert in what they do. They know far more about it than you do because you've never done it. And there's a shift that happens at that time where you have to pivot from being just the one who knows and that's the source of your authority, to being one who can support the team in knowing through a different approach. And I think that is a harder challenge, and I don't know if people just ignore that challenge or, you know, but I think that's oftentimes when I work with people something that they're going through, because they were great. And when they first started managing, it was easy and it did work. But what worked before no longer works at a new level, and they have to find a way of adjusting and changing to make that effective.
Yeah, interesting. Let's talk a little bit about technology systems, maybe in modern work. Because your background is very deeply technical, how does that shape the way you coach leaders in engineering and product? Is it really just having that underlying mutual kind of like, I mean, I imagine you being there, like being, I've sat there, I understand, having that empathy that you can, is that the key? Is that your secret sauce, or is there more to it there?
That's part of it. Part of it is being able to speak the language and understand what people are talking about and the details of what they're going through. Part of it is being in the scene and having a degree of empathy that can share some of my own experiences in ways that can help people see for themselves. Sometimes it's harder to see what's going on, but when someone holds up a mirror by sharing something from their side, all of a sudden it lands better. So that is a big part of it. And I do try to stay as up to date on what's going on technically as well. So there are times where, many people in middle management are trying to figure out what to do with AI and where things fit. And so being able to talk through that with someone who has some experience and can see how it relates to the role can be helpful rather than if somebody hasn't been in the seat and they may not understand exactly how something might fit for them.
Right, right. No, I can definitely see the value there, big time. You mentioned that even as a coach, you still rely on technology heavily on the back end of your business. What tools are you using today to help you run your coaching business efficiently?
um, well, there's basics like Stripe for payments, right? Which I got to put on my coding hat and get that built into my website for doing that. I've used Claude Code honestly for a bit of automation on the back end, usually about tracking my calls and tracking metrics. So I found that useful. And I haven't really automated very much on the front end. I like maintaining a degree of natural human communication, even with prospects. I feel I'd rather be able to adapt and adjust and relate to people than have AI doing it in the background. But I do use it regularly, and I have a secondary job where I'm a fractional COO for an early stage startup, and there, it's a lot of Claude Code and working through problems. So a lot of that allows me to keep my skills fresh, to understand what the tools do well, what they don't do well, and to keep an understanding of what's working.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you use a CRM also, like to track your clients, and then you're using something right to for the documents, some sort of file library for do you think you'll ever build out some sort of platform, like you'll kind of scale your, coaching business where there'll be some sort of self-serving, you know, um, where your coachees could go and get more information? Are you looking to do something like that?
I have looked at it. It's probably not at this stage. It's one of those things that I am slowly but surely working on writing a book,
Yeah. Oh, exciting.
and I think that when done, I think will be the catalyst for a little bit of some trainings or some programs that I can build on the back of that to provide some extra resources. But that's sort of the path I've taken is I want to clarify both for myself and through the process of writing it, the theoretical underpinnings of how I work and how I think about management and leadership. And then I can make that more readily available, both in book form, but also some people prefer videos, some people prefer courses and things. So I could see it coming from there and, building a platform around it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll definitely keep an eye out for that. I think that could be there, right? Because I think sometimes maybe those engineer middle management, they like to consume, think about it, so I could see there being I don't know, I could see a market for that. But we've reached the point of our podcast where we do a quick little rapid fire. I'm going to ask you questions. You're going to say what comes top of mind. No right or wrong answer. Are you a coffee or tea person?
T.
And what is one leadership book you recommend most?
Ooh, that is a hard one. Because I've grown kind of concerned with a lot of the leadership books.
Oh, okay, fair. You're like, you can say pass if you want to pass.
I may say pass on that one. I don't know that there's one that I could fully recommend at this point.
All right, I love that. Um, what is one idea about leadership that you disagree with? Then let's tap on there. What's in the ethers that you're like, hey, that's wrong, or take that with a grain of salt.
The focus on the individual as the primary unit to look at rather than the social group, and seeing leadership solely as an individual endeavor rather than more of a group endeavor.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. What is a technology tool that you use every day, every week? What you needing?
I would say the one that's been the mainstay for probably the longest has been Todoist.
Oh, yeah, me too. I like that one too.
Keeping me organized.
Yeah, it's a good app. It's a very good app. And are you a remote work or in person worker?
Remote.
And then what about metrics or intuition?
Primarily intuition, but I like some being able to go back to metrics to say, am I way off or do these point in the same direction? Yeah.
Right. No, that makes sense. And what does being cyber savvy mean to you?
For me, it's about continuing to learn and understand and look at technology in the complex role that it plays, right? And so AI being the example, that you've got the doomers who are saying it's horrible and it's the end of the world, and you've got the people saying that it's going to save humanity and be wonderful. And I think it's useful to recognize that it's both. And with every technology, as we were talking about with writing, there are places where the friction it removes may be harmful, and there's places where it can actually positively add friction if you use it in certain ways that can be helpful. And so to me, it's about thinking critically about how we use technologies to move us in the direction that we want to go, and not just as a, you know, doing whatever necessarily is easiest,
Yeah, consumer.
but recognizing what's underlying it and what can help.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. Keith, this was such a smart, honest, and grounding conversation. What I really appreciate about your perspective is that you're just not telling leaders to work harder, optimize better, or push through. You're really helping people step back, understand the structure they are operating inside of, and make sure they make intentional choices about how they lead, how they protect their energy, and how they define their success. And for our listeners, if you want to connect with Keith and learn more about how you can work with him, please make sure you check out our show notes. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining. Keith, I really appreciate your time and your perspective. You're doing great work. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Rachel, and thanks for a great conversation, some great questions.
Thank you.
The Cyber Savvy Woman podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Hey, thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.